we don't put a lot of thought into this person that is going to join you on this journey, and put the amount of time and effort into ensuring it works when it is the foundation of the business.
Yes.
The statistic is that 65% of businesses built with a partnership will fail because of issues between the founders.
Hi, welcome to Founders in the Wild. I'm your host, Dave Morey. We're based here in Vancouver, and today my guest is serial entrepreneur and author of Co-Founders Handbook, Tanis Jorge.
Hi there.
All right, so thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
So I'd like to start at the beginning, if you don't mind.
No.
Maybe take us back. I know you started your first business right out of high school.
Yeah.
But was starting a company something you always wanted to do? Was it something you watched as a child?
Yeah.
Maybe talk us through it.
Yeah, you betcha. So I grew up in an entrepreneurial family, actually. My dad was a door-to-door vacuum cleaner salesman in his early years. And when they moved to BC and I was born, he had sold his vacuum cleaner business and then started with Yellow Pages. He was actually a Yellow Page salesman. But growing up, he often shared like the sales principles that he learned from being in business and as well in sales. And so that was, I think, really laid a foundation for me in learning about setting your own destiny and being in charge of whatever it is that you want to do. And my dad always used to say to me, life is a numbers game. And if you just run through the numbers, whatever it is you set your hand to, you'll succeed. And I guess I took that to heart because I believed that it wasn't about my smarts. It wasn't about, the right timing. I just believed that it was a numbers game. And so I think that mentality sort of must have stuck into me because I think ultimately that's what leads to entrepreneurship, is this believing that if I just work hard enough at something, and of course there's other elements, but I think that was a big key piece. So that was a foundation that led me to really believe that maybe entrepreneurship was going to be the route that I was going to go.
So cool. So cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's funny. So I think we had talked about, my dad was also a vacuum
Yeah,
salesman.
I know. And I've met other people too who have had family who have, I'm like, this is the thing. Okay.
And they sound very similar. So I think that
Yes.
tenacity involved in selling something.
Totally.
Like
Yeah. It's raw sales when you're
it
knocking
is.
on people's door. Like you really, that's raw sales.
Yeah, I can't wait for him to hear this later. He's gonna chuckle. Well, okay, so now, today we'll be infusing lots about your book, but I really want people to hear your story, right? So you come out of high school. Did you know that you wanted to start a business, or did it kind of just happen? Tell us about that.
Well, just briefly, when I was 17, I started an Amway business. And I don't know how many people know what the backdrop is, but Amway's, if you think of it, is kind of like a Walmart, right? They're the supplier, they have the products and you do, but behind that, when you start an Amway business, you actually end up signing up to like a business teaching group. And that's what happened. We when we started, I say we because it was my boyfriend to be my future husband later, we started this Amway business. But we ended up joining an organization called Worldwide Dream Builders. And in that, it was like a business training. And so it had this really incredible business for the layperson. So it was like a book a month you had to read, and there was tapes, because we were that old.
Yes,
there was tapes to listen to every week of people's stories and how they succeeded in their business. And then there was conferences to attend throughout the year. And then you had mentors who you spoke to about business. And you had two 17-year-old kids who were really mentored in free enterprise, entrepreneurship, the basics of business, nothing fancy or anything, but just the basics of business. And I like to say we're programmed to think outside the box. And while we never ended up building an Amway business, we actually stayed part of this organization for probably about 7 years. And it was like a 7 years of business education, like day in and day out. We really jumped into it. And so that laid the foundation. So by the end of it, I was like, I don't want to go to work for somebody else. I want to be my own boss. And so that's really what I think had me decide I'm not going to do college or university. I'm going to do something that's my own business. And that, I think, was where the first seeds were planted.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge. Yeah. And Amway, that, great place to learn, and then building your network like that.
Yeah.
So now tell us about the actual founding of I think it was IQuiri?
Yeah, IQuiri.
Yeah.
So Stephen, who was my best friend in high school, we were inseparable, but then after high school, we drifted a little. And so one day, about a year out of high school, he reached out to me and said, listen, I have a business idea. I found a business that is happening in the US, but it's not available here in Canada. Do you want to start it with me? And I remembered how awesome hanging out with him and doing school projects were, that I thought, even on the worst side of things, we're just going to get to hang out and do a cool project together. And so I said, okay. So it was in the online credit reporting industry. It was getting access to your credit report online. And no one had done it yet here in Canada. So we thought, okay, we'll take the model that's in the US and we'll build it up here in Canada. And that's how IQuiri was started.
That's huge. So did you raise funding for it? Did you bootstrap?
Not really. We pretty much bootstrapped, but we also had friends and family. So he had his family and some of his family friends that did it. We did work with some programmers and different things and work out a strategic alliance in that respect. But for all intents and purposes, it was just through family and friends and our own bootstrapping. So it was on our own. It was your classic startup, like scraping through what's going to happen. We had no idea if what the end result was going to be. But early on, we did decide we were building this company for an acquisition. And we did identify who we thought was going to acquire us. So we built our business to accommodate that company. And I think that's a strategy for entrepreneurs. Yeah.
So you had the vision for who you wanted the eventual acquirer to be. Then did you work backwards from there?
Yeah.
And if so, kind of walk us through that.
Yeah, like I said, in the first, in IQuiri, it was really modeling after a pre-existing business model that was in another country, right, in the US. And so we took their model and we applied it to the Canadian market. And then we looked at, what they did, how we could integrate into them if they were to acquire us. And we just built it backwards. Yeah, we made sure we modeled it so that if they were to bring us on, it would be an easy, integration. And that was pretty much it. It was a lot more difficult than that because the regulatory environment in Canada is very different than the US. But that was how we modeled it.
And then talk us through getting the first customers, right? So you need people to actually be paying for at least, or maybe you can even tell us about what was the business model at that time. That was kind of like the late 90s would have been the internet boom. There was lots of froth around investment into companies like this, but you bootstrap, right?
We were on our own.
Kind of, you were being a little different.
Yeah.
Tell us about how the actual technology was. And then eventually, how did you start to court your desired acquirer?
Yeah. So we, at the time, affiliate marketing was kind of on the startup and kind of getting
early days.
really aging myself right now, but affiliate marketing was really the go-to. So that's what we did. We identified companies like freecreditreport.com and like all these sort of credit report networks that were coming of age. And so we just sort of plunked ourselves into that. And one of the things that Stephen and I did and do very well is taking an idea and building the foundation for that. And so with IQuiri, it took us about 2 years to build that, to get the contracts from the credit bureaus. There was a lot of the regulatory, like I said, the regulatory environment in Canada was very difficult. So we were a BC-based company, but ended up finding out we had to be Calgary-based because that province had a very unique structure that we could actually do what we were doing in Canada. So there was a lot of setup that took place. And then once the product was built, we really just wanted proof of concept. We really wanted just to show that we could deliver a product and it was a feasible business model. Once we had that up and going, the decision was, do we market it and scale it, or is now the time for acquisition? And that's what we chose, the latter. We chose the latter. Did you just
ring them up, or did you meet them at a conference?
Yeah, basically we kind of started a conversation when we rang them up, introduced ourselves, and then one day we got an email, just a random email, and said, hey, this is Experian, the M&A department, and we recognized you for what you're doing. Do you have time for a conversation? And we carried on. We're like, yeah, we do. We're like, yes, this is what we foresaw, and off we went. Yeah,
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was very fun.
All right, so you are in your early 20s.
Yes.
You have had a successful exit.
Yeah.
What did that do to you as like you're a young adult?
Yeah.
And I I'm assuming this was slightly life-changing for you.
Yeah.
Did it kind of, what did it do to your drive? I know your trajectory of you starting more companies,
yes,
right? Especially in the same space, but like, where were you at, especially you and Stephen? Did you think, let's go, let you go your way, I go my way, let's go retire? Or what was your mindset?
Yeah, I think after each company, Stephen and I always looked at each other and was like, well, that was fun. That goodbye, kind of like that's over. But what ended up happening with hindsight is that we had found ourselves in a very unique little niche. And we had positioned ourselves as what we called the Switzerland of identity, which meant we never ever tied ourselves to an exclusive in anything. And so what happened is we kind of got known as, hey, you can work with these guys because they're not tied to any one particular credit bureau or one particular company. And so when we shook hands and said, okay, that was great, we had a success under our belt. Not too long later, we got a phone call and were introduced to another opportunity. And we just found ourselves back, let's explore that. And then the next thing you know, we're like, okay, I guess we're starting another business. And that's where NCB Data Services jumped in the second time around.
Yeah, and that one was so the first business you started, built, and sold within, what was that, 4 years?
3 years.
3 years, okay. Mm-hmm. And then the second one was even faster.
No, it was 3 years as well.
Okay.
They were both 3 years.
Fast.
All three of them were 3 years. Right. I don't know.
It's incredible.
3 years was our magic number.
But did you do that business the same way? Did you say, okay, let's start this, because you ended up selling to the same
That's right,
acquirer.
to the same company, yeah.
And did you know they had a kind of a gap that you wanted to fill?
Yeah, we ended up having a very unique conversation with the acquirer of our first company, and we identified a need of theirs. And so when we left that meeting, we said, let's go make that happen. And then we'll call them up again and say, hey, you know what you wanted? We just made it happen. And so that's what we did. So we walked out of that meeting and we went out and we facilitated the needs of this acquirer as well as the needs of the company that we were working with. And so we worked with another national Canadian credit bureau to help bring them across the country. And then we helped orchestrate their acquisition. And in that acquisition, we orchestrated our second company's acquisition at the same time.
That's crazy. Okay,
yeah, it was fun.
Now, again, still early 20s.
Yeah, now
You've sold 2 businesses.
Yes.
What even made you consider starting your third one?
Yeah.
And again, in the same sector.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you, after you answer this one, but I want to ask you, how did you not get locked up?
Yeah.
Right? You often hear people want to lock you up with some kind of non-compete
totally.
or whatever.
Yeah, totally.
But, so now, what made you go into your third now?
Yeah.
This is just, it's crazy.
Once again, a very niche market facilitates opportunity. I think if you can get yourself in a little space and become known as the experts and easy to work with. And so our third company, now another company who heard about us, they were looking to expand internationally. Their company, Kroll International, they did identity, employee identity background checks and such. And they wanted to expand their identity fraud products into Canada and Australia. And we had connections there. And so they just reached out to us and said, would you help facilitate that? We said, I guess we're starting another company again. And we helped them create an insurance product for identity fraud in Canada and then as well in the US. And we worked with them over 3 years to get that built out. And then they bought us out. So that was our third one as well. So yeah, it just, again, it's just finding the niche and just figuring out a way that your company became so valuable that it made sense.
You have eagles
We
right,
do.
right next to us here. It looks like a...
It's a classic BC moment right now.
Yeah.
Pause for the eagles.
Yeah, for any of you watching on YouTube, this is also very classic Vancouver winter weather. And I'm really happy you agreed to do this in this weather, but we lucked out. This is like the only non-rainy day this week.
It's very true.
We
it's very rare.
And we have eagles. Yeah, really
Cue
nice.
the eagles
Yes.
for the Vancouver scene.
Well, that's so cool. All right. Well, so you've had these 2 exits, or now three
Yes.
exits. Did you consider, like, now I can retire? Did you ponder this?
I did, in the sense that at this point, I said, okay, I've given up my 20s to business, and I want to start a family. So once we sold our third company, Pharos, we I once again shook hands and said, I guess it's time to move on. And I said, I'm going to start a family. So I ended up having 2 kids, 18 months apart. And then Stephen reached out to me once again and said, listen, remember one of those ideas we had? I'm going to head down to Silicon Valley, because we had never raised money. And he really felt like it would be great to have that experience. For him, it was an experience. And he said, I'm going to go down there and work on this. Do you want to do it again? And I said, well, no, I'm starting a family, but to avoid paying taxes of money still sitting in one of our companies, he said, well, let's use this money to build this business, some seed money, instead of giving it to the government, let's put it to work for ourselves, and I'll be like a silent partner. And again, we'll go out and we'll see what this idea does. So he headed down to the Silicon Valley, down to Sunnyvale, and we began doing some R&D on this product. And we started. We had a small engineering team of 2 that I managed just while that was being built, and then Stephen was doing R&D, and then eventually decided, you know what, maybe we should raise money, and so we headed down that road. And a year and a half later, we raised our first seed round.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So wait, what was the first seed round?
It was a $2 million round from Bloomberg Capital. Yeah, it was at the time that was your average, and it really set the course for us to. One of the things that was great about raising money in Silicon Valley is we were able to really use that as a form of reputation. Whenever we went around, we would say we're a Silicon Valley funded company, and there was something about that really kind of in people's minds put us at a higher level than like just saying I'm a Vancouver funded company. And it was a cachet that was really valuable to us, which we used and really laid into frequently throughout the growth of the business. It's really helpful.
Now maybe you can tell us about what the company is, because you're one of the few tech unicorns out of Vancouver, and I think that's probably really great advice to consider where your funding sources are.
Yes.
So that you can help prevent what I've even experienced. It's kind of a discrimination against perhaps Canadian companies, or at least they just imagine that you're not serious, right? But maybe tell us about that.
Yeah, so what we brought to them was the idea of building like an online form of identity verification using your cyber footprint. So that was the idea. And then that particular way of identifying you could use in different aspects, such as if you're going on a date, we could do some sort of can someone refer or say that yes, you are who you say you are, through these sort of online channels like LinkedIn or Facebook, or using your social graph. And so that was where it really started. And we had a PowerPoint and a bit of a beta, and that was what we took to market. It was very innovative at the time. Now using your social information is a little more out there, but at the time it was extremely innovative. And we really relied on our expertise that we had in previous ventures to say, listen, you need to listen to us. We understand identity. We understand this space, and you need to you need to trust us as the leaders. And that's one of the things that I came to learn, is that investors, especially when you're seeking money for a new venture, they're looking at the idea, but they're really looking at you. Are you able to do this again? And so I think as an entrepreneur who's going to try and raise money, you really also, outside of your business model and idea, you really have to identify why you are the person to be able to make this happen. And that was a key piece of it.
Yeah. Well, and I think you had stacked 3 exits up before. I'm sure that you had that kind of you had the wind in the sails, a lot of momentum. What advice do you have for entrepreneurs that don't have that kind of level of success going into especially their first business, or even perhaps their second, if their first wasn't successful and they want to go into another one, they have this great idea. Do you have advice for how they may be able to kind of get a little more credibility going in with those investors?
Absolutely. Well, if you remember, in our 3 previous companies, we built them over 3 years and then they exited. So they were all exited kind of early stage. And so when we were meeting with investors, they said, okay, clearly you know how to start a company, but can you scale the business? Can you take it to the next level? And so we had to find ways to prove that we were good at what we did, that we were good founders, that we had the foundation in our knowledge and our ability to do things to do that. So one of the ways we did that was we built an incredible board of advisors. And we went out and found people in different industries, leaders in their industries, who heard about what we were trying to build and put their stamp of approval on it. And that was so powerful when we went to raise money. It was like, hey, we're great at this, but look who is backing us. Head of identity at Google, ex-CTOs at PayPal,
So smart.
all these incredible people who said, I've heard what these guys are trying to do. I'm a leader in this industry as well. And what they're doing makes sense. So I would tell any entrepreneur, again, make sure that you've also stacked why you're an amazing founder, but also go out and identify people who will hear what you're trying to do and say, I think that's going to work. And then they stamp your approval, they get on your board of advisors, and that's another slide on your deck when you go out and pitch.
So you may have had capital to give them some kind of advisory fee.
Yeah.
But do you have any other creative strategies for compensating advisors? Maybe options or any other strategies you may have used?
Yeah, I think ultimately options is great. That was what we did. It is really important to find a way that really does give advisors some sort of feedback, a letter of recommendation, allowing them to put that they're on your advisory board. Even if your company becomes successful down the road, repaying that advisory board with some sort of public recognition into what that they've done. Anything that you can do, you might not have a lot in the beginning, but really even asking them, hey, what can I do in exchange for this? I can give you some options, but is there any other way that I can support you? And let them do that. But yeah, it's a great question, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs ask and then they don't reward for people's time and experience and expertise. So
and
especially
I think they get too busy.
Yeah, definitely.
And then they look back later and they're like, oh
yeah,
I should have been doing that.
Yeah, it's so true.
Oh, that's super great. Okay, so you had, the build-up years, and I know that Trulioo is, very well known in the community here.
Yes.
It's well known in the kind of identity space.
Yes.
The company grew to a valuation at 2021 over $1 billion, 1.65. You did a very large funding round.
Yes.
Extremely successful.
Yes.
At that time, you then stepped down from the board. And since then, you've been still very active. So tell us about what you've been doing since you stepped off the board.
So when I knew that I was going to step out of the day-to-day at Trulioo, and because I had decided at a certain point that I remember I had a young family at this point, and I really wanted to be able to, just be at home. That was really important to me. So at about 5 or 6 years into being COO of Trulioo, I decided that it was time for me to step out of the day-to-day. But when I made that decision, I thought, well, what else am I going to do? What interests me? What inspires me? And I thought of 2 things I liked. I like travel and I love public speaking. So I thought, okay, so what do I want to talk about? And so one of the things I thought, well, I could talk about entrepreneurship. Obviously, I have a background in that, but it's a already pretty heavy space, a lot of people in there. And then I thought I could talk about a woman in tech, because that was something that I often would get asked to speak on. But that role, it wasn't necessarily something that resonated with me. But the other thing that I would often get asked to meet founders about was their co-founder partnership. And they would say to me, I see that you've had this co-founder for now, like 20 years. And how have you managed to make it work? Because it's a very difficult relationship.
Yes.
How have you navigated this? And I thought, that's what I could talk about. That's what I could do. So I thought, okay, I'm just gonna do some research and start talking to co-founders about their partnerships. How did they succeed? And as I started to do that and meet with people, I realized, wow, there's a lot of people suffering in a partnership right now. And you don't hear these stories.
Yeah.
And I thought, maybe I need to write a book about this, because I think I could write it from the angle of those in the trenches who've been there, and their wisdom and their advice.
Yes.
I wish I had, or if only I had, those moments were so powerful. And so that was when I decided, I'm going to write a book.
You wrote the Co-Founder's Handbook, and I loved it. I love
Awesome.
business books, and you can see I've highlighted and I've starred, and I'm going to be giving this to any new founders that I meet. I've had a lot of success in having different co-founders. One was a brother-in-law.
Right.
It ended up working out great. But,
Awesome. Happy to hear that.
but he and I had other kind of founding partners for some of the businesses.
Okay.
And a lot of what you described here, I wish I had done.
Yeah.
But we ended up making out fine and
Yes.
kind of like separating from partners who just, and you described a lot of it, but the way that you incorporated real life stories is very effective, because I think most people, when they're reading books, they can't relate to the information being shared.
Yeah.
And I know I don't want to share too many secrets. I want you to go out and I'll put the link in the show notes for this for you. But can you share just some of the, high level, words of wisdom when someone is considering starting a business and they feel that they need to have a co-founder in the business? What advice do you have as just kind of the starting point beyond going out and getting the book?
What surprised me, what surprised me, and it actually was the way it was for me as well, was we don't put a lot of thought into this person that is going to join you on this journey, and put the amount of time and effort into ensuring it works when it is the foundation of the business.
Yes.
The statistic is that 65% of businesses built with a partnership will fail because of issues between the founders. So the fact that when we start a company with somebody, the focus is on the business, and never once do people really go, okay, but let's stop for a minute and let's determine if there's any challenges that we're going to have just based on our lives, our personalities, our conflict styles, how we learn, how we communicate, because those are the things that end up destroying partnerships. And so few people ever dive into the relationship with these people that they're partnering with. And so what I realized with what I did with the book is I wanted to switch that. I wanted to say, you're going to build your business model, and then you're going to intentionally look at these people you're going to build a business with, and you're going to ensure that partnership is strong. You're going to strategize on methods of how you're going to stay honest and truthful with one another, and recognize that relationship is going to be almost as intimate, minus a couple things, as it is with your romantic partner.
Yes.
That your lives will become so intertwined, and you have to be ready for that.
Yes.
And so that's my first thing is this is not a set it and forget it relationship. This is something you got to be intentional on.
Yeah. And when I was reading this, I tried to do some things like the partnership agreement, the buy and sell agreement, but sometimes even bringing that up at the beginning of a relationship,
Yes.
it can be almost offensive.
Yeah.
But when I had this and I finished it, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is so good, because this gives people not the excuse, but it gives them the ability to say, you know what, let's read this together.
Yes.
And let's talk about the things that we think were really useful.
Yes.
And then it helps to kind of get that, that whole kind of like, why are they doing this goes away. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that is going to be so useful. And then you had some comments in the back just about communication.
Yeah.
And around like timelines for communication,
Yes.
daily, weekly, monthly, yearly.
Totally.
That was so smart. And I wish I had done it. I didn't do that. I mean, you would kind of do it organically, but the way you wrote it was just super easy to understand. But
good.
now,
That's great.
but you know, in terms of resources,
Yeah.
can you kind of walk us through? I know you've created a organization, the Co-Founders Hub.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will talk to your point about how hard it is to introduce a strategy to a new co-founder in the early stages. I always say, like, in the very beginning, you're in the honeymoon phase. You are about to build the company that is going to disrupt the world. Like, you are so optimistic. Like, this coming will not fail. Of course, why would you even start it? So you're super optimistic. The person beside you are just as optimistic. You guys are in sync. You're like, yeah, we're going to kill this. And you're ready to go. The last thing you're going to do is go, now, what if you become an alcoholic and don't come to work anymore? Should we plan for that? You know, like, there's all these like really awkward conversations that you might want to identify ahead of time so that you know, there's a myriad of things that you should discuss. Like, what if you want to have your kid join and I don't like your kid? And, you know, there's these really awkward conversations, but exactly that. The book is like your scapegoat. It's like your excuse to trigger conversations that maybe, first off, you're worried about in the back of your mind. There's a little red flag that you got, but you don't want to bring it up. So this can be that, you know, beginning of a conversation, or it will trigger conversations that I never even thought about. How do we talk about equity? How do we talk about if we run out of capital, but you have extra money and I don't? So you're going to be the one to put more money in. How's that going to be compensated? And what does that look like?
Well, and the likelihood of that happening is very high.
Totally high.
But you never think it is when you start.
Not at all. And there's a myriad of things that can happen. So yes, the book is that ability to kind of, like, I love how you said that. Let's just read this together. That's why I recommend investors give this to portfolio companies. Like, anybody who is around a founder, say, here's a book, and then that founder can go, oh, I got this book from somebody, I guess we got to read it. Inside they're like, yes, you know? So yes, anyway, that is an important piece, and that is what I was trying to create. Yeah. So it was important.
And I think entrepreneurs tend to look at it, you know, they're very optimistic, rose-colored glasses. And
the dreamers kind of the world, yes.
But the reality is things are going to get rough.
Yes.
Because that is guaranteed. Actually maybe the only guarantee.
It is
that it's going to be rough. And you should be prepared for those rough patches by doing a lot of the things described in this book. And then you can prevent some of them by communicating and by proactively addressing these things. And then, like, in terms of resources, that was one area I struggled with. Like, this is going back now even like 15 years. We struggled to find good, clean documents around the buy-sell agreement. So we were kind of, you know, making these Frankenstein things. We were pulling stuff offline.
Yes.
Partnership agreements, same thing.
Yeah.
But you also outlined kind of the key components of it.
Yes.
I think that's something that I think I would be interested to hear your thoughts around, like, advice, because that's also at the early stages. People don't always have a lot of money to pay for lawyers to do these things. So how do they do it in a cost-effective way? Yeah.
So I think ultimately you have to think about it this way. How much are you going to invest into this business? And you come up with your number, 100,000, 20,000, whatever it ends up being. You're raising 3 million, whatever it is. The risk of it falling apart is very high, that number. So your partnership, if it's 65% of the risk of your business failing, what is the cost of that loss versus what it is to get a lawyer to draft that exit strategy in case it does fall apart? Anything you can do to strengthen it, the value is there. It's like an insurance policy. So so your legal agreements are so essential. Finding a lawyer who's got a background in corporate law, who understands partnerships, who has that experience, it'll be the best money you ever spent and if it goes sideways, right? So that's important. It's something that it'll save you, and it's worth it. It's priceless. And then, yes, I started the Co-Founders Hub. It's about to launch with products and services that support entrepreneurs throughout their journey. So for those who are looking for a co-founder, we have our self-assessment, which, again, this is me helping you be intentional about who is this person I need to bring on board. And I think a lot of times we just go to the default of skill set. I'm starting a tech company, I need a software engineer, or I'm starting a restaurant, I need a chef. And it's like, no, there's actually some other really important factors that you need to consider. Different personality types, your life stage, how much time can you commit? Those sort of things become really, really valuable. And so the self-assessment helps you walk yourself. Who am I? What do I bring to the table? What do I need from the next person? So different products at different stages. That's what the Co-Founders Hub's about.
I love it. I can't wait. I'm not doing a business right now, but I'm going to do it anyway.
The assessment's great just to help you identify, what you bring to the table. What's that skill set that I have? And it even can help you if you're not going to bring a co-founder on. What team do I need surrounding me? And it's helpful for that too.
Well, and you go into that in great detail around selecting.
Yeah.
Did you make up the PIKE?
I did.
Okay, so talk about PIKE, because I just thought that's perfect way to describe what you're kind of looking for. But maybe tell the audience.
So oftentimes, I have had a few different business ideas in my time, and I would identify people that I thought would be excellent co-founders. And so I would pitch them my idea. And then what I would do is I would sit back and I would wait for them to call me, because I didn't want to chase anybody. And I remember with Stephen and I, when we first would start a business, I mean, there was 3 a.m. texts. There was like the 7 a.m. Are you wake up yet? I have this idea, or in emails or whatever. It's just, you can't not think about it. And I started to think, how can I help people identify if that person truly wants to? Because another of the big issues that happen between early co-founders is one person says, I'm into it, but then when push comes to shove, when the capital needs to be invested or the time needs to be put in, they go MIA. And so I thought, how can you do that? So PIKE is passion, interest, knowledge, and excitement. And so those 4 things are ways to sort of identify, is this person truly excited about this venture? And they're very similar, but there are unique little ways that you can really, like a detective, is this person on board or what? And it's the closest I could come to try like an algorithm or like an equation of how to do that, because it is a gut thing, and it is a bit of luck and a little bit of hope. But there are some things that you can identify in people to say, I think they're on board.
No, I love it. When I read it, I'm like, I'm using this. But it's good to also, you explain kind of how to kind of interpret it. Right?
Yes,
and
exactly.
The assessments help. Right?
Yes.
So, I think you did a phenomenal job. I'm super excited to give this to people.
Yeah. It's much needed. Again, it's surprising how little attention is put on the spotlight of the co-founder partnership. And I think part of that is, going back to what I said, it is such an intimate relationship. And it is something that it intertwines your personal life, your professional life, your spiritual life, your emotional life. And that relationship becomes very intertwined. And because of that, it becomes very private, and you need to be vulnerable about it. And when things go sideways, you don't have a lot of people to turn to. Your investors will be terrified if you said, I don't talk to my co-founder now. That would be freaky. Your staff, your employees, you can't go to them and share what's going on behind the curtain. So it's a very isolating experience. And so so the idea in this was to really give that tool to people as a resource, both when they're starting and when they're in it, but when they're alone in the conflict. That's another time that this is the voice. This is something that can help guide you through mediation, or that unfortunate moment when you realize you got to exit. You got to either find a way to get out of the partnership, sell the company. How do I handle this with my team? How do I how do I exit without killing the business? There's a whole lot of really deep things to consider. And so the book is an attempt to really walk people through that as a guide.
Yeah, it's nice. You kind of had the whole kind of evolution, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's important. So my daughters, they wanted to ask, well, they couldn't get here.
Yeah, that's right. We did it during school time. Sorry.
That's all right. So but they had a question because
Okay.
they have an interest, and even, you know, my eldest son, they want to start a business.
Yeah.
And they understand, and I read, you know, your comments around it can be dangerous with family. Do you have advice for them on how to basically kind of, I guess maybe a recipe that they could follow to have some success as a family business?
Yeah. So I'm in the middle of writing book number 2. So the second book's called The Co-Founder's Handbook Family Edition.
Perfect. And I did not.
Yeah. So part of the reason I really wanted to separate that is because I have seen the destruction of families at such a level when family businesses go sideways. And I think in this respect, with its two, let's say, strangers or unrelated people in business together, if it doesn't work out, they can close the doors and go home to family. But with family, that doesn't happen. No. And so the level of caution and risk that's at play, I definitely, I'm the first thing I identify is you have to, in like 10 times the intentionality that this book recommends, and almost do it by the book in order to ensure that nothing is, the family isn't destroyed in if something was to go sideways. Okay. And I think the first page of the book, of the family edition book, the first page I think is going to say, don't do it. But if you do, read on. And I truly believe that, because you just really need to know the risks. So what is the most important thing to do if you're going to be in a family business? Again, it is about identifying boundaries. It's going to be about really identifying clearly roles. Here's what you're responsible for. And then a very, very mature look at what is important in life. Okay. And identifying, family first.
So talk to me about succession, because that's a big issue, especially with family businesses. People are considering, basically passing their business on, and that's their exit strategy.
Yeah. I did a lot of research into family businesses. That was one of the key pieces, because my husband had a family business. He took over from his father. And so I really delved into the succession. And my takeaway when it was over was don't pass your business on to your kids. Sell it. Give them money, help them to do their thing, but because again, there's so much complexity that goes on in that. There, having exited a company that is still operating, that I started, it's like having a baby, and it's when the baby launches and goes off on its own, and you are just there to watch it and wish it's its best. That is such a difficult thing to do.
I bet it is.
And so succession. When you hand it off to anybody, whether someone bought your business or whether or not you're passing it into your kids, for the person who founded that business, that emotional, breakaway can be very difficult. And then you add on that the complexity that it's family, where there's so many cliches, like the second generation destroys the business, or the founders always come back. It becomes really important to recognize how that can not just be difficult for those involved, but actually be difficult for the business model as well, because you have a team who's maybe still attached to the initial founder, and then and the new founders have to get rid of everybody, so they've got a new guard and the old guard's gone. So it becomes very, very complex and very difficult. And so I think if you're able to sell your business, pass on to kids. I think that's a really valuable way to do it. And if you can't, again, I know I'm saying it the same thing over and over again, but be intentional. Be intentional about what is important here. Is it the money? Is it the business? Or is it the relationship between the family members that's involved? So it's very complex. And I'm just always very much about helping people be very serious about this because it's important.
Yeah, I'll take that into heart because I want to pass something on to my children. So perhaps it's just money.
Yeah, exactly. exactly.
So,
well, and your advice, right? Like your advice in helping them build into their lives early on. Your kids are young, so it's like pass on this knowledge that you're giving them so that they can go and aspire for their dreams, like really truly their dreams, and they're not sort of held on by what these expectations from a business that already exists, right? So you pass that knowledge on to them and then help them go out into their dreams. That's priceless.
Well, so speaking of the kids, tell me about the school that you're working on, or the academy.
Yeah. So when Stephen and I graduated high school, we never did college or university. And so one of the things that as we were building our businesses, we kept saying, oh, why didn't they teach us this in school? And I remember thinking to myself, if I have kids, I really want to have them have a very practical education. And so about when my kids were in grades 3 or 4, I looked at what they were learning. They were in a fantastic school, an IB school. I loved it, loved the community. But I still looked at the curriculum and I said, this is not applicable to today. Yeah. This is not real life in 2020. So I said, I'm going to homeschool. So at that time, I had just left the day-to-day at Trulioo. I had the time, and I thought, I'm going to homeschool. So for 2 years, I homeschooled my kids with a focus on entrepreneurship, financial literacy, and life skills, because the life skills matter. And so that is what I started. And then when COVID hit, I had a lot of families come to me and say, listen, I just really got insight into what my kids are learning. And, you just triggered what you do. What's happening there? And so a group of families of us got together and we decided to start a school, an online school, because families were from different parts. And again, with the focus on those 3 aspects. And we started Live, Learn, Launch Academy.
So can you say that again?
Live, Learn, Launch Academy. And it's an online school. We have a small cohort, 12 kids. But again, the focus is on these key pieces. And I have another acronym now that I apply to my curriculum. I guess I'm an acronym girl. And I call it the PERT curriculum. And so when we designed the curriculum, it had to be practical, experiential, relevant, and tailored. Beautiful. So when your kids are in school and they look at you and they go, Dad, when am I ever going to use this? I can honestly say to the students and the kids in our school that if we're teaching this, you need this. And I looked at like my life as an entrepreneur, as a mother, as a member of a community, having been a boss, having been an employee, all the things that I needed to know. And that's what goes into our curriculum. So we teach life skills, everything from we put them in cooking school to learn how to cook a chicken, to how to sew a button, to a first aid course, to how to network, how to start a business, how to come up with an idea, how to market, what is AI, all the things that are happening today. That's what we teach us.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
So you have a small cohort now. Are you thinking to expand this
I don't
across
know.
the country? Or,
I have a lot on the
North
go,
America?
but it is, education is on everybody's radar. And there's not a single person that I've met who, when they hear what we're doing, isn't saying like, either whether it's they're just unhappy with their kids are learning ideologically in school or what they're learning educationally, academically, people are looking for a new resource. So we are debating what we're going to do with that. We have an incredible curriculum that technically a homeschooling parent could literally every day, they knew exactly what we write down everything. So we might go that direction. We may expand to more classes. There's a lot of opportunity, but I got too much on my plate, so I don't know. I need a co-founder in that.
No, that's a big, and I think you may have outreach. So,
yeah.
if people want to reach out to you to talk, about the school or other things, how what's the best way to reach you?
You know what? Honestly, LinkedIn is the best option, and just reach out to me, ask your question. I'll try and get to it quickly. But even on my LinkedIn, I do definitely talk about a lot of these topics, and there's ways to get involved. So the Co-Founders Hub is another place to get some more information, and then livelearnlaunch.com is the school, and there's ways to contact through there as well.
Wonderful. Well, do you have any organizations, local organizations you want to just give a shout out to as we end off here?
Yeah, actually, you know what? I sit on the board of an incredible local nonprofit called Ally Global. What they do is they help aid women and children rescued out of sex trafficking. So they have organizations in Nepal and Cambodia, and now they're working closely with the Canadian government because unfortunately, human trafficking is a reality even here. And so Ally Global is doing incredible work to help facilitate healing for those who have been in that situation and are rescued, and as well to bring awareness. So ally.org is a place.
And I'll put all the links in the show notes. But
yeah, thanks, Dave.
Thank you so much.
Thank
for
you.
Us.
This was a lot of fun. I've never done an outdoor podcast, so
this is in
I'm
the wild.
in the wild. Yeah, exactly.
Cold.
I love it.
So thank you for doing this. If
We'll
you
do
can
a
see us
beach
shivering,
one next time.
Yeah, we'll be doing it in more warm locales. But yeah. So,
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.